Last time I showed, during World Art Day on the YouTube video for World Art Day, I showed you how to start with the plumb line. But this time, I think it's going to make more sense to use the ring. So basically, we're going to use the ring as a geometric container. So the ring is circular, but I'm going to treat it as a perfect geometric ellipse, and I'm going to put that ellipse inside a circle to start with. So I'm going to start the actual construction with the circle. So I'm going to draw a little darker because I know from experience teaching on this setup that I have to draw dark so that everybody at different internet connections can sort of see. So this circle is going to contain that ellipse of the ring. Now the ellipse, as you can tell, it's not a perfect circle, it's been turned, so it's for shortening. If you look at the ellipse guide, we can see that. And so it's a vertical ellipse and it's rotated. So as it rotates, the major axis is going to tilt. So all I really need to do, I'll do this in another color. All I really need to do is, to begin with, is just capture that tilt through that center point. And so it's pretty subtle here. It's not like a really obvious tilt, but what I'm looking for is which way basically is the major axis of that ellipse tilting. And it's going to be subtle, like it's only a couple degrees off maximum. Okay, so it's pretty subtle. It's going to be something like this. And so I'm just going to run a major axis for my ellipse through that, right? So it's not 90, it's maybe 80, somewhere between 85 and 90, maybe 87, 88 degrees in terms of the rotation, or another way to think of it is if that's 90, it's just a couple degrees off. So what do we know about an ellipse? Well, an ellipse, the minor axis is always going to be 90 degrees, always, and that's on the flat page. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to create a 90-degree angle. So the way to do that properly would be to create a perpendicular bisector of the line. If I want it to be accurate here, I'm kind of going more for speed here, but I would basically be doing that, and then that, and that. And where those little scratches cross, where those arcs cross, I'm going to run a line through that. Okay, something like this. If I don't have a compass, I could do a 90-degree angle like this. And if I don't have a triangle, I could do a 90-degree angle with just the edge of a piece of paper. So look, I could just put this paper up here like that to create a 90-degree angle. I don't need any special tools for this. I'll do it with the paper just to demonstrate that. And so the actual ellipse is not going to be as wide as the circle. It's going to be smaller than the circle. So let's go, and I'm just eyeballing that distance here. But whatever that distance is right there, it's got to be the same on the other side. So let's do that. So I'm going through both of these points, or just right under them, because I've got a thickness to my line. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to add this distance on the other side. And I could do that with it's more like that. I could do that with my dividers if I wanted to be careful. I could do this, I could do that, and then I could do that. It's pretty good, maybe a little shy. And that'll give me my 90 degrees, which is my minor axis here. Okay, so in other words, the circle is being used to calibrate the whole drawing, or it's what I'm using in this case. It's always specific to what you're doing. And then the ellipse is the next thing. So why am I starting with an ellipse? Well, because the ellipse is like a perfect frame. It's a perfect frame for my coordinate system for the figure. So it's, in this case, it's the ideal way to do it. So this is basically just basic geometric ellipse. I'm not doing anything here that is not essentially contained in the ellipse PDF, because I know my major and minor axis. So that's where the ellipse is going to be on. This is the outer part of the ring. So I'll do the same thing here. So it might seem strange that I'm spending so much time to focus on the ring when it's a figure drawing, but that's sort of the point of this whole lecture, is that the figure, what really matters, what we really need, maybe it's back here, what we really need to begin with in the drawing are positions on the page. So I need 2D positions. I need to know where the joints are. I need to know where every part of the figure is in order to draw it properly. If I start drawing the figure and things are in the wrong place, it's fine as practice and it's fine as a sketch, but it will never look good. I'd have to do many iterations to fix that. Just estimate. so I have a visual of where that is. It'll also trace better. So this might seem very careful, but this is actually quite a fast ellipse. This is the major and minor axis of the ellipse, and then the circle would be the vertical through the circle would look more like this. But I'm going to draw a plumb line, which is the most important line in any drawing, is the plumb line, because that's the line of gravity. And the plumb line is the plumb line is the only accurate thing we can get from life, easily. It's the simplest, most accurate thing. So I just hold this up. If this was from life, I hold this up, and I can't get a horizontal unless I had like a level or like a laser level with the bubble. So I can't get the horizontal easily, but I can always get the plumb line. So this is the most important construction line in any drawing, is the plumb line. It's also called the plummet line. It's also called the perpendicular line. It's also called the principal line throughout history. There's different names for it, but it's not any straight line. It's the most important one. So even though I have this great circle construction here, I want to figure out where that is. And I'm going to decide to run it through sort of the center of because I'm going to treat this whole thing as a plumb bob. So the whole thing is the plumb bob. It's going to balance, right? Unless he's literally swinging, which he's not. So it's going to balance out unless he's swinging back and forth. And if it's balanced, then I'm going to use the actual knot in the center of I'm actually going to use the center of that rope, and I'm looking at where that is relative to the major and minor axis here. So this is my plumb line. I normally would do this after determining the front and the top and bottom limits, or first. So here's our line of gravity. Leonardo says that line of gravity will often pass through the pit of the neck, and that's what Bridgman and that's what Hokusai, all of those artists got it from Leonardo, but it comes from classical antiquity, and ultimately it's from observation of nature. So it actually does line up pretty well, it looks like, with the pit of the character's neck. So now what I want to do, that's the main geometric construction I'm going to be using, but what would be useful is to contain the entire figure, so I'm ignoring the ring now. And I'm just going to contain the entire figure, ideally in one triangle. Why a triangle? Well, because a triangle, the three angles reinforce the accuracy of every other angle. So it's the simplest. I can't create a polygon with two edges because it can't close. So the triangle is the simplest straight edge accuracy tool. It's the simplest polygon I can use. There's a lot more to it, but that's why. So I'm looking for tangents now. So I want the longest, most spread out tangents possible because that's the most accurate. And so it looks like maybe from the left side of his lower foot to the elbow, his left side elbow. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the screen. I'm not talking about his left. I'm talking about what I see as left. So I think that could be a good long line. And then also I could go from the other side of the foot, that lower foot, up to, if I want to do this with two triangles, here, let me do it like this. I'm going to start by, I'm looking for this angle visually. So basically I'm doing this kind of a thing. I'm looking at the angle from the hand that's sort of holding the ring on the left side to the elbow, and that's going to be sort of a corner I'm going to create. So basically I'm going to go, because I'm looking at where the ring is here, and I'm looking at this coordinate space, like, to help me, and I'm comparing that to the reference image. But I'm going to say I want it to come here to the elbow, and then it's going to shoot up this direction. It's going to touch the hand here, and it's going to keep going. So it's going to go from here down to maybe here on the circle, which I can't see because the circle's imaginary, but if I drew the construction, it would be very obvious. And then from here down to the foot. So I'm probably gonna have to overshoot the foot because I'm gonna touch it on the big toe side. And then, so this is gonna be, so these are three lines. So this is one triangle I'm already thinking about. And my paper got wet from being in the garage. I had moisture, so I have to push down. If it looks a little bowed, that's why. But it's still good. I just have to push down harder on my triangle. This is going to probably go further. This is where it's tangent, but it's probably going to have to extend. I think I'm going to make this line tangent with the circle because it's going to touch the foot here, and then it's going to continue out. And so from here, so this is, I think it's gonna be 2 triangles, and then from here I'm gonna come, I wanna touch the hand that is on the other ring. So here's the ring, and it's got the knuckle sort of coming out like this. So this is just out in space. This is basically out in space, but I can touch the hand, and I can actually touch like where the arm would be if it was, because it's sort of hiding behind the ring. But I'm gonna extend that line because I wanna get, ideally I wanna get 1 triangle if possible, but that's often not possible. So I can do 2 triangles, which just adds 1 exterior end. So if I could just extend these basically, that's what I could. But this triangle, so okay, so basically the foot is going to be making contact probably down here and here. Those are tangents. The elbow is going to be here. The hand is going to be making contact here. And then this is going to be like, the knuckle is going to be here. And then the arm is sort of, it's behind the ring, but somewhere here the arm would touch. This is just sort of out in space. And then, so I've contained the entire figure in 2 triangles. So that's really useful because as I look at these triangles here, and I remember which points, and I could write down what these tangent points are, like, oh, it's the outside of the end of the first metacarpal of the right foot. I could get specific, but this allows me to check, recheck. I also, this is a protractor that I created for my students. I could also come up and check the angles and actually get numerical values for it. And I could also, if I'm drawing over the reference, I could also copy the angle perfectly using geometry techniques and compasses. But right now I'm trying to visually estimate it because that's more the context that most artists are working in. So this is all I need to start putting the actual stick figure in place. So now I'm switching gears, and now I'm thinking of joint positions. That's what a stick figure is. A stick figure is an abstracted simplification of the skeleton. So all I want is joints. And I have to decide what those positions are. So, for example, like I think the pit of the neck is probably lining up on this line here. And so I can put a dot, because I'm looking at the axis and I'm looking at I can put a dot right where I think that is going to go. That's going to be the pit of the neck. I could do the epigastric fossa, which is like under the pecs. It's that little hollow where the xiphoid process is. So this could be like this could be a straight line that represents the suprasternal notch to the epigastric fossa, technically. But what it really is, it's sort of representing the sternum, but with a straight line. And then I could work my way down to the navel, and it looks like the navel is sort of returning to that line. So the navel's down here. I'm going to connect the sternum to the navel, basically. Now this is not like inside the body. These are sort of points on the surface. That's why I'm starting with them. They're a little easier. The points that are inside are a little tougher. So for the head, I use the chin from the most projecting point of the chin to the apex of the head. That's the angle that's the axis I like to use for the head. So relative to these lines, it's going to be here. It's going to be in the apex of the head. So I'm estimating that by imagining lines that are running in front of the ears and where they would touch, and then I'm imagining the center line, and I'm trying to guess where that would be in 3D space. That's how I'm estimating it. It's a little tricky because you can't see every point you want to use for your stick figure. Some of them are buried inside the body or behind something. And then his chin sort of down like this. So I'm also going to grab the top of the hyoid. So I'm going to grab this point right here. And it's going to be pretty shallow because of the pose, but it's not nothing. There is some angle there. And then I'll bring that down to the pit of the neck. Maybe it needs to be a little longer. Hold on. Yeah, like this. Okay, so chin to the top of the head, from the chin down to the pit of the neck. This is actually a short distance because it's frontal, pretty frontal, but also because his neck's down. And then from that to the suprasternal notch, from the suprasternal notch to the epigastric fossa, from the epigastric fossa to the navel. I know that the 20th century artists say don't use nipples and don't use navels. Baumis says that. Peck says that. My teacher said that. They said don't use fleshy landmarks. You guys have probably heard that, right? Because they move around, right? Well, I don't actually agree with that advice anymore, because we want to know where all of it's like a constellation, right? I need these points to be in the right place. And this is very, very much on the axis of the ellipse, on the minor axis. Those are the nipples. So I'm just looking at these visually. But I definitely want to get the nipples in the navel. Like, there's no question about that. if you're doing sculpture, for example, you need those. And then from the pit, so then from the pit of the neck, I'm going to go up to where I think the acromion process would be. That's a tough one because because all those muscles are in the way. I have to sort of imagine where that would be. But from experience, and you could look at X-rays to help you get that skill more accurate. But okay, so this is the suprasternal notch to the acromion process. So the acromion process is right here. It's that little like hockey stick looking thing. And I'm using the most lateral point of that. Okay, so this is being foreshortened more, so it's shorter. This is going to be longer. And I can connect those together to get a triangle. That's actually useful for the same reasons that the other triangles are, but also the triangles are nice to put in a stick figure because it helps you see if something looks off visually. It's a little hard to abstract it so much. And then, so under the acromion, so under meaning if I'm moving to the medial side of the arm and I'm going down a bit, that's where that's where the center of the head of my humerus is. And so I like to keep those separate, but you could also, the Codex Huygens, they make the acromion and then the center of that joint the same. I just like to make them separate because it looks a little more familiar to what I'm used to. And so I'll connect those two. I'll connect those. So these are the center of the head of the humerus, okay? And then the acromions are above them. I do this because I want to run this out to the elbow. And so in this case, I've changed this a little bit. So this is the ring, and then it's got a thickness, and then I'm imagining, so I'm going to use the most projecting part of the elbow here, of the olecranon process, and then here it's actually past the ring. It's past the ring, but it's sort of at this kind of an angle. And I'm always looking at the center of the circle. So if I'm checking these angles, I'm looking at the angle relative to an imaginary vertical or horizontal, always, like relative, but I'm also looking at these angles relative to the center point of my circle, so I can kind of think of them as angles, like literal angles from like a clock, for example. So to me, it looks like the end of that elbow is actually coming out like way out here. Way out here. And so from here to there, that's going to be the line that's for my arm. And then from here to here, and I could run it to that acromion. I don't need to have two. I don't need to have this and this. I could run this to this if I wanted to. That's what the Codex Huygens does. And then from here, I'm going to go up to where I believe the wrist would be. And I'm using the top. So for that, I'm using this point here and this point. So it's on the top of the wrist. That's what I'm using there. But because that's actually hidden, because that's hidden by the hand, I have to kind of extrapolate that, but okay. And one thing I've been doing lately is I've been turning this into a triangle, actually, because visually it helps me visualize the pronation or supination of the forearm. So that's another new change. So I do it like that. I know it looks a little funny, but it actually works well. And then from here, it's very easy to do. The hand is like a continuation of this. It's not really a box. It's just these 2 points here. So now I'm going to use these 2 points here, the lateral ends of the dorsal side of the hand. But you can use any. You could use any points for your stick figures. It doesn't actually matter. The main idea here is just to properly position the figure on the page. That's literally all we're trying to do here. So that'd be the hand, and then there's going to be fingers. I'm just using straights here. But for now, all I want is these positions, and I don't even need to have rods to run between them. But I'm just trying to get the position of every joint, like a constellation of stars, on the page, and also the ring. That's all I want. It's actually a very simple geometric task. If we're not doing too much at once, if we're not trying to do too many things at once. So I'm actually trying to think as absolutely mechanically. I'm trying to think as mechanically as possible. Just because I just want these point positions, because then I can trace a figure drawing over it on another sheet, and that's what I'm going to show a little bit of that. The demo is mostly about this part, but I'm going to show that as well. So that's all I want. All I want is the joint positions. End of story. Nothing else to it. At this stage. Uh-huh. It's not, don't think of it as a stick. Think of it as a joint position 1, joint position 2, and you're just connecting it with a straight line. So this is how long is the humerus? Well, where's his shoulder? Where is his shoulder relative to that axis? So if I imagine the axis on here, how far, look, first of all, where do I think the head of the humerus is? It's like here, right? Well, where is here relative to that construction? That's all. That's all it is. Tell me if that makes sense. It's where are the positions of the points in the reference. I'm working from a photograph here. And so if I was working from imagination, I would still need the same points. But I would arrive at those points differently because I'm designing the figure. But here I'm working from observation, which is valuable. It's valuable to be able to get this. So I could construct a stick figure and then draw many figures on it. Once I have that stick figure, if I don't ruin the drawing, if I keep it clean, I could draw many different versions of many different figures and I could change things. I could change the sticks. I can move it, but without the positions, I don't have anything. So that's the priority. The priority is getting those positions. And then I'm just going to it's a little small and I don't have really time for this, but I would just use every joint gets a straight. Okay, so now I'm looking at I'm trying to find acis to acis here. I'm trying to find the tilt of that, and I'm looking at the position of where that is. So what is the tilt of the pelvis? So he's got this like dancer's loincloth thing, and then the upper rim or band of that, it gives you some idea. So from the humerus here, I'm not going to go to the nipple. I like to go to a line that is sort of on the level and roughly perpendicular in 3D space, or perpendicular in 3D space to the epigastric fossa, so down here. So these nipples can move in relation to this because the rib cage doesn't move just because the arms move. But I'm going to take the humerus down to that location here. So this is in relation to the epigastric fossa. So that gives me sort of a nice shape. That gives me this nice shape. And this is sort of tracking the edge of the pectoralis. Not perfectly because it's straight, but that's really useful. And then I connect that to the acis here. So right now I'm just connecting the dots. So the idea here is when we're looking for point positions, we want to be extremely accurate with that because otherwise they're not helpful, right? So rather than mixing all of the processes into one, I'm very explicitly separating these things out. And so this knee is in this area here, but for the actual point that I put, I use where I'm imagining the top of the tibia to be. So it would be like the vertex of the tibia. And it's going to go this way, and it looks like it's got an angle that's coming down like this, and it's slightly outside the ring. It's slightly outside the ring, maybe like here. It looks like the center of the ankle, and I'm just picking the center point between the malleoli. It looks like it's kind of level with the bottom of the ring. And so this is sort of my lower leg here, the stick for my lower leg here. I've been using the bottom of the foot as like a rectangular construction there, but it's so shallow here that right now I'm just going to treat it as a straight line. I'm going to treat that as a straight line. I'm just trying to position this stuff correctly. Literally, it's like I'm drawing a constellation of stars. And then down here, so it's going to touch here and here, but I use a little like rectangular plane for the base of the foot, but it's sort of like where the footprint would go. So that's going to be lower and to the right. So it's like the bottom of the heel and then either side, and I'm not including the toes in that construction. So I got to think about where's the actual surface touching the triangles, because that's not the same as where my sticks are or where my armature is. It's another way to think of it. So this is like this is basically the bottom of the foot, not including the toes, right here. So this is the same thing, but the angle is so glancing that it's like this. So okay, let's do the top of the tibia here too. So it looks like it's just it would be right outside this ring in this little area here. So that's gonna be the top of my tibia, and then I gotta come down here for the foot, and so it doesn't leave me much guessing wiggle room there. I kind of know it's gotta be like that. And I could also run this. I'm just gonna run it to the trochanter for now. I'm not gonna do the head of the femur this time. So I'm looking for a tensor of the fascia lata and gluteus medius, because that's going to give me an indication of where on the surface the trochanter might be. I'm not using the trochanter inside the flesh. Here I'm actually using it as a sort of a surface point. So the trochanter would be inside there. And then I'll just connect that to the top of the tibia. And this might actually be all I need. This might actually be all I need for my stick figure. I just want to show you real quick, you guys, how the next layer can go. And I want to make this ideally I want to make this horizontal so that it doesn't spin at all. So I'm using my triangle to help me with that. What happens when we have all of our positions in place? Like what are the next steps, or what can we do with it? Well, the answer is literally you can draw it any way you want at this point, because now I have the positions much more, not perfectly accurate, but way more accurate than I would have got if I was just sketching from life, like roughly. It's way more accurate. So now that I have that, I can literally just do the figure drawing on this now. So, and there's no rules for how exactly that works, but obviously I could, and I'll do this with dotted lines and then I'll fill them in because that's how I've been working lately. Okay, so I'm including the hair here, and I'm just creating an ovoid. Okay, so I'm actually coming down to the top of the hyoid there because that's my axis right here. And then I can put as much construction on here as I want for the head and stuff. So I could do like ellipses going through the eyes, for example, and sort of wrap those back. I could even do ellipses that are going to be where the eyebrows are. I could wrap those back. I could do a little stand-in for the ear as a shape. I could sort of show the bottom of the chin to sort of separate that from the bottom of the or the top of the hyoid here. So now basically what I'm doing is simple round forms. This is the seed, the bean, the curves between essentially, but I'm doing it in relation to these points. That's the big difference. This would actually be SCM coming up here, and this would be the medial side of that. So I'm basically giving myself what I need to do to go right into final lines. I could do that, I could show that. The straight line of the sternum, well, the sternum's not straight. So I got to turn this into more of a curving line. And then also getting down to the navel, that is also not straight. That's going to have a curve relative to that straight line. So do you see how I'm creating a convexity relative to that curve? Now I can also do a simple round form for the rib cage. And so I'm looking at the nipples. I'm looking at the nipples. I'm looking at the reference. I have a pretty good idea of where things are. I'm looking for the serratus anterior because that really shows me the curvature of the rib cage more clearly. I want to ignore latissimus and teres major right now and sort of look for the curvature that I can see. And I could bring this all the way back up to C7. I don't really need to do that at the moment, but so that's just simple round form. It's just basically like an egg form for the rib cage. And then looking at ACIS, I could actually do another simple form, sort of cutting through the butt. This is just a round form that's just showing me sort of how this is oriented. So this is just sort of a round, sort of a container down here. And of course, the most important thing is this is where the navel would be, is the center line. So that's where it goes behind the thigh. So I have a lot of information about the arm. Generally speaking here, I'm looking for a long curvature that goes this way towards the elbow. And ignoring the elbow for a minute, that is sort of like a bean. It keeps going. And it goes all the way up here to the wrist. So if this is the stretching side, and yeah, we also actually have the elbow which projects. But if this is the stretching side, then this would be the compressing side. This is what Leonardo da Vinci and all those artists write about. So here I want to find more of the fullnesses, and here I want to find the fullnesses because we're compressing, and then we're overlapping here. So this is bunching up on this side, and then the wrist is going to be a little straighter, and then I'm just sort of summarizing this into, that's like the bean form. So basically what I just did was something like this. It's like this. This is the stretching side, and this goes back to ancient art, and look at Botticelli to learn this, and this is also what Glenn teaches as his stage 2. So I'm applying that logic here. The biceps are going to be coming out of the armpit. The coracobrachialis and biceps are going to be coming up like this. We're going to have the triceps coming like this. This is also triceps here. And then the deltoid, it sort of visually merges with the pectoralis, and that's got that sort of beautiful curvature that we learn. So it's sort of it's got a convexity, a concavity to a shallow convexity, and that's the roundness of the rib cage. And now I have enough information to do latissimus dorsi and teres major. This is pectoralis and deltoid. This is really narrow margins here, so I have to be gentle here. It's really easy for me to make that too wide. Okay, so anytime you have a spiraling of these forms, spiraling around, on the contour, it's gonna look straight. That's what's going on there. This is tricky because I gotta get this right. Doesn't give me a lot of room here. Yeah, his upper body is so strong because of the activity, and his lower body is so underdeveloped relative to his upper body. It's interesting. Okay, so this is gonna be the other side of the ankle. And this is also, obviously this is for shortening, so this is a tricky one. But what I'm doing right now sets me up to, for example, I could do Fioletti curves on this. And because you got to remember when the leg's crossing over, it's very easy to get it confused and draw the lateral view instead, or drawing the wrong leg basically. But this is an important rhythm that connects the tibia to the attachment of sartorius and gracilis and these other muscles. Yeah, so this is all for shortening. I wouldn't draw the foot this way with the toes doing this, but because I'm focusing on accuracy right now, I'm going to leave it like that, but it's too for short, and that's not a good view of the foot. And then down here, so look, here's the base of the foot. So I'm going to just building the foot on top of that, and then the toes are past that construction. I don't want to really overshoot my triangle, but oh wow, basically just got through the whole thing without even really thinking of it. And I'll put some dots here for the ring. And so now I can see where that's intersecting. I can also correct it. That's the outside, and then the inside is here. I don't need to draw the whole thing. I just want to show. Oh, and then here I've got, this is external oblique, like that. And then this is the tensor of the fascia lata, and then gluteus medius. And this swings under the ring. Swings under the ring. And then all of this is here. And then the ring is, right, okay, and then the ring would be, oh, that's that circle. See, I almost drew the circle. You don't want to do that. You want to keep it separate. That's why I was using different colors. Just going to put a little bit of the hair here to give me a sense of where that is shape-wise. But guys, look real quick. Look at this real here. Look how accurate that was. If I was just drawing this from life without this, the accuracy would be like 30% worse than that. This is what I'm this is the big thing I want to communicate here. However you would draw this, if I gave you this thing, and I'm like, okay, draw this however you want, you could now do that because things are sort of in the right position. And even though it's not perfectly accurate, but just compared to what I would be able to do without this work, the accuracy is much, much higher. So if you're doing this from life, how would I get this construction from life? Okay, well, first of all, for my vertical plumb line, I would hold this up. I would hold up my plumb line. That's how I would get the yellow line, right? And I could just keep checking that every time. I could keep checking that. To get my circle, it's up to me. I'm just deciding how tall the circle is. All I need is a radius. So I kind of started with the circle. So I just decide where my center point is. It's arbitrary. And then not arbitrary because I'm thinking of where I want it on the page, but I created my circle. And then I use a plumb line to not only to see where the gravity is going from the ribbon that's tied through it. So I can see, okay, that yellow line is not going through the center. It's sort of off to the left. So I could do that assessment. For the ellipse, this ellipse is tough because it's only tilted a little bit, but if I just look carefully and I just kind of like do this kind of a thing, I just rock it back and forth, or if I'm doing it over my paper, I'd be like this. Is it like, okay, oh, I think the major axis is like this, right? Okay, well, where's that major axis relative to just the line of gravity? So that's just an angle. Let's say it's 3 degrees, 2 degrees rotated counterclockwise. Okay, that's all I need to know, and then I just rotated the line on the center point of the circle relative to that. Then once I have that, I know that it's 90 degrees here. I don't have to measure anything, but I do need to estimate how far the end of the minor axis would be from the perfect circle. So to do that, I would hold it up and I would try to send it through the center of the circle. Let me do it. I'll do it here, but I'm simulating doing it in front of my vision. So I do this, right? I do this and I'm like, okay, now I'll turn that 90 degrees for my minor axis. And where would this, so if I drew that circle, I can see that space, but I would have to imagine it. That's why you want to draw on your reference. But this is just an estimate. This is how squashed I think my ellipse is. Now, if I don't get that accurate, because I'm relating all these things to the ring, it's going to stretch and distort. But that's me imagining my circle and my ellipse and then estimating that distance. It would be better obviously measured. So now I have this line and I've got the circle and I've got the ellipse and I've got the major minor axis. From there, I decided to do a triangular envelope. And so at first I wanted to see if I could fit the whole thing into one triangle, but I could, but it would have to be like, the points would have to be way out here, and that's too much empty space, which isn't ideal. So instead I looked for the longest tangents I could find. And the longest ones I could find were between the foot, like here, right? That point right there on the foot, all the way up to the elbow. That was the longest line I could see. So I could just do that with my string or with my pencil, holding it up. So I'm thinking, okay, it's from here to here, right? So I just extended that. I just extended that line. But I could cite that, or I could, if I have my level, and then I'm like, okay, I think it's this angle, I can just estimate that angle, however many degrees I think that is. So there's different ways to do it, but all of this can be done from life without having a photographic reference. It's just the tools are different. So the ideal way would be to have the photo and draw that construction on there and then physically measure off of that and scale it or rotate it however you want. That's ideal. Less ideal is to have a photo that doesn't move and it's frozen in place, and being able to, if I need to, take a measurement off it, check angles. And then the hardest would be if it's just in life and it's not quite holding still, it's moving. That would be the hardest version. But it doesn't matter how difficult the version is. That's the geometry I need. Or that's the geometry that I've decided that I need to get the result. It's this level of geometry. So whether I'm estimating it, looking at it, whatever the method is, this is the information that I want, because I know that once I have my joint positions and everything in place, I can do a drawing. And keeping it in layers makes a lot of sense, because now I can try again. I don't have to ruin this if I don't like where this goes, and I can have intermediary layers. I can actually get rid of this at this point. I could stop worrying about the accuracy for a minute. But what I could do is I could now do a drawing over this, just focusing on whatever the next stage I'm trying to get into my drawing. I could even go into the lines. I could show that. I could even go into the lines here. Let me reline it up so I still have my construction underneath, because that's helpful. So I'm sort of like basically like recalibrating it. So I could go right into line work here. I don't need to do a lot of like intermediary stages. So I'm going to zoom in my reference a little bit because it's real small. I'll just do this in a little spot to show. So this would be a convex curve, and this is going to be sort of straight here, then it comes down, and then this becomes convex again. And this is sort of a very shallow curve that represents the rib cage here, but it is convex, like that. And then the external oblique is overlapping here, but I am getting a real shallow concavity there. This sort of is foreshortened away. It steps out. So these are Fialetti curves now, which you guys have learned, or you guys could have learned. And then here, I don't want to make a big dark line here probably, and I could choose if I want to sort of play that up more, but just for the purposes of showing this now, I could bring this down. And then maybe here, this gets real soft in here, so I don't have to do a dark line there. Probably don't want to. And then there is a cast shadow here that makes this look a little shallower than it is. I might want to sort of bring that up a little bit here. And then, so now I'm sort of thinking a little bit like this would be coracobrachialis, and then this would be the biceps, and they're flexing, and they're going away where I can't see them. And then down here, actually like here, this is the influence of the humerus. And that is, so now I could put in as much anatomy or as much subtlety or whatever I want basically at this stage. And then here, it's important that this looks like it's sort of emerging from underneath because of the position, just because of the anatomy. And so this comes up, and then this is going to turn down. And then this overlap, I got to get this right. I don't want to put that in the wrong place. And I could spend more time trying to work out these sort of internal forms, which I didn't put these in my stick figure, but you can sort of see these, like the abdominals. which I could choose to do asymmetrically because they are asymmetric in nature, or I could make them more symmetrical and clean. So essentially I'm like sort of just trusting what I have there, sort of drawing a little more loosely and more the way I would like, sketch or draw from life. And you can even put in lines that are going to represent where a terminator is going to go, like this, or do some internal lines, like this is going to be that little deltopectoral area. This is going to be a clavicle here. I can fit all the anatomy I want into this, and I can even separate like the form sort of turning here. I can put little notes for how that little change is happening there. You can make the nipple a little more specific in shape. So if my navel is here, in this case, I'll just get I'll try to capture a little bit of the actual, so I can actually choose at what point I want to, look, this is external oblique right here. Grabbing on, that's external oblique. I can put as much in here as I need or as I want. And then this is serratus anterior here. So this is a finger of serratus anterior. It's going to the medial side of the scapula. But do you see how once I have the positions of things, essentially, I can sort of focus on everything else. If I was trying to do this all at once, the results wouldn't come out as good. And there's also not really a good reason to think that you need to do that. Do you see what I'm doing here? So I'm essentially, I've got the positions, and so now I'm working out what I need for the drawing, and I can go into the head a little bit. Yeah, if you're watching this or you're hearing my voice and you are not actually a student at New Masters Academy, or you used to be a student at New Masters Academy, hopefully if you've been wanting to improve your art skills, that you decide to invest in a structured education, because this is not stuff that artists figure out on their own. Art is taught. Art's based on art. It's an inheritance. It's a tradition. It's something where my teachers taught me. I teach my students, and some of my students actually study with my teachers because of the miracles of the internet and everything. So, if you really want to see progress in your work, you need to stop self-studying. You can self-study for the next 10 years and make less progress than you would make in 1 year of like full-time structured study. So I really encourage you to get involved with New Masters Academy and get involved with the Drawing Foundations program, which is, in my opinion, the best in the world. It's the opinion of the people here, and I think I could make that case and win that argument. It's really the best structured education to learn how to draw. And so there's many different aspects of it, many different layers of it, including your own personal explorations and studies and decisions about your work and your projects and your style. But there's a lot of stuff you need to understand to do something that the teacher can make something look very simple in a demonstration or in their work. They can make it look easy, but you try it on your own, you realize it's really not. So I do recommend that you enroll at New Masters, and I'm happy to have done this demo. If you guys like this, or if you guys want to see more, I could do a follow-up on this too. But I recommend that you draw this stuff over. You could copy this pose, maybe pick some different poses too from that video. Come up with some kind of construction. It doesn't have to be like what I did here. These are decisions I'm making. Come up with some kind of construction. Draw that over, so you're tracing over the photo, the construction, right? You're tracing it so you can do that digitally, but try to be really specific. Then recreate that construction on a separate piece of paper. If you want to, you could trace the construction from that tracing onto this. That's okay. But it's more helpful if you have to reconstruct it, because you have to think of every angle, and it kind of teaches you what the body's doing. Whereas if you were to trace this construction, it would be efficient, but it wouldn't necessarily be as useful for a learning exercise. So draw the construction over the photo or the screenshot, then try to recreate that construction accurately. That's not easy. That's very difficult to do. Once you have that on another layer, start to build the figure whatever way you would currently build your figure drawings, depending on where you are. So if you're in Intro to Figure with Sheldon, or if you're in Force with Mike Matesi, whatever the methods you've been learning at New Masters, use those, but use those on a layer over this and see how it goes. It should dramatically improve your accuracy. If you design a good construction or choose a good construction, and if you transfer it faithfully and then draw over that, and you're paying attention to the construction, you don't just ignore it and just don't look at that layer and draw. But if you do those things, you should see a massive improvement in accuracy. So I recommend you try that. And then if you guys are interested, I could do another stream where I go over those, and maybe, I could go over what you did from the same video, and then I could maybe, draw over your work. Or we could do something like that as like a follow-up if that's interesting to you. So yeah, just let us know, let the team know. Thanks, everybody.
Well, the great thing about NMA is that being in the program for almost 2 years, I did start to see how all of the elements that we're taught come together. Now it's easier to kind of build that foundation and then build on top of it because the foundation is strong.